with a large number of independents now, yeah, Trump's in trouble. Republicans are in trouble. But within the Republican Party, I just don't see any evidence of it.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. So today on the show, the president is still on a winning streak from Tuesday night's primaries. But is it going to come back to bite the GOP come the midterms? Also, I'm talking to Doug Jones, a former Democratic senator from the state of Alabama. He just won the Democratic primary for governor in his state. But I'm going to ask him, how is he going to defeat Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, who is backed by President Trump? Also, if you're wondering why the basketball fans in your life are not answering your text messages, I've got the answer for you. So Tuesday was a major primary day across about a half a dozen states. President Trump was not on the ballot, of course, but it felt like he was. In the Republican primary for Kentucky's 4th congressional district, another one of Trump's hand-picked candidates, Ed Galrine, ousted incumbent Thomas Massie. Now, Massie has defied the president on many different issues, but two in particular standing out: the release of the Epstein files, which initially the president did not want, and the war with Iran, which Thomas Massie disagreed with. So I think the big question here is, was it actually worth it? And what do Tuesday's primary results actually tell us about what is coming in November? For this, I bring in no other than the tired, the weary, and the ever-excited election man himself, Steve Kornacki, NBC News chief data analyst. Hi, Steve.
Tired and excited. I guess it's a contrast of emotions here.
But it's accurate, right?
I think it's a pretty good summation, yeah.
Okay.
It's the story of my life.
I've known you for a while.
Tired but excited.
All right. I'm going to come back to Massie in a second because I know it was one of the biggest races that we were watching last night. But just talking in general here, I mentioned, right, there was primaries in half a dozen states. The maps are so gerrymandered now, Steve, right? Decidedly red or blue, it seems, at this point. Are there any House races, really, that feel like they're still up for grabs? Or are voters basically going to the polls and we're knowing the outcomes before we even actually get the outcomes?
In the vast majority of congressional districts, the answer is the latter. We already know. But of course, control of the House, the division, I should say, in the House right now is just a couple seats. So the battlefield doesn't have to be that big to be incredibly consequential to flip control of the House. So it is a much smaller battlefield than if you went back to Trump's first term, that midterm in 2018. If folks remember, Trump, had an approval rating that looks a lot like his approval rating now. It was the blue wave midterm. Democrats gained 40 seats. It's a lot harder to look at the battlefield this year and say the Democrats are going to be able to translate this kind of Trump approval rating into that kind of gain.
So when you talk about really it's just a few seats that need to shift one way or the other, which House seats does it seem are still the most competitive when we're looking at November?
Yeah, I mean, we saw one last night in the primary in Pennsylvania. There was a Democratic primary in the 7th district of Pennsylvania. This is the Lehigh Valley, so sort of the Allentown, Bethlehem area. Ryan McKenzie is the Republican who holds the seat. He won the seat in 2024 by defeating an incumbent Democrat by 4,000 votes. So it was one of the closest House races in the country in 2024. That's a 1-point margin. And it's a district that in 2020 went for Joe Biden and in 2024 went for Donald Trump. So it is going to be one of the most closely watched House races this general election, this fall. It's one of those districts where if Democrats are taking back the House, this is one they really, I think, kind of have to win. So last night they had a primary, and Bob Brooks is the name of the candidate they came up with. It was a bit of an interesting story. He was endorsed by both Bernie Sanders, pretty far off on the left there, and Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. You don't necessarily often see Shapiro and Sanders on the same page, but they were with Brooks. So Brooks is going to be their candidate against Ryan McKenzie, and that's going to be one of those districts it's different than what you were just saying. It's not one where we go into it knowing the outcome. It's going to be genuinely suspenseful.
So let's talk about Thomas Massie, because one of the reasons why we were watching Massie's election in this key race is we wanted to understand if Trump's endorsement of Ed Galrine, this newbie to the race, right, would actually get Galrine over the finish line and defeat this incumbent Thomas Massie, and then what that says about Trump's power in this primary calendar without him actually being on the ballot. And Massey lost, right? He defied the president on many different things. As I mentioned earlier, the release of the Epstein files, the Iran war, two in particular. So I'm wondering, did Massey kind of misjudge the Republican voter and their loyalty to the MAGA movement and the president himself?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I think we've seen here now is a string of these where there's the power of the Trump endorsement on the one hand. There's also the power of Trump looking at a Republican incumbent and saying, I want this guy out. This guy's been disloyal. Just this past weekend, Bill Cassidy, two-term incumbent Republican senator, doesn't even get a quarter of the vote in the Republican primary. Trump had said, Cassidy, disloyal, voted to convict me in that second impeachment trial in 2021. I want him out. 3/4 of the voters in that Republican primary in Louisiana agreed with Trump and voted for somebody other than Cassidy. And now we go into Kentucky last night, and here's Tom Massey. And, he did a little bit better than Cassidy. He got 45% of the vote. But ultimately, this was about, Trump's definition of what it means to be a loyal MAGA Trump Republican in the age of Trump, what it means to be loyal to Trump.
You're the polling guy, though. How do you reconcile this? How do you square this with Trump's approval rating? He's down amongst Republicans 4 points. Yes, he's still up. I mean, I think approval rating as the latest numbers is 83% amongst Republicans. But still, that's down 4 points from the last polling, and then 37% across the board when it comes to approval ratings for the president. How do you square that with the success we're seeing?
I just don't think he's really down with Republican voters, and I just don't think he has been. I mean, it can jump around a couple points in the polls, but I think the story of Trump and the Republican base for a decade now has been an unusually deep bond that Trump has with his party's voters that goes beyond what we've seen with most presidents before. So, yes, you look outside the Republican Party, certainly with Democrats, that's been the case the whole time. But with a large number of independents now, yeah, Trump's in trouble. Republicans are in trouble. But within the Republican Party, I just don't see any evidence of it.
So it seems as if Trump's camp, Trump's team feels like they have some momentum now, because now he's getting these wins and he's saying, okay, I'm now going to endorse Attorney General Ken Paxton for the Senate Republican primary runoff in the state of Texas up against John Cornyn, who has also not necessarily been loyal to the president of the United States. And I think arguably some would say Ken Paxton is a flawed candidate. One of the reasons why the president hadn't endorsed him up until now. Is this going to move the needle in Paxton's favor in this runoff in Texas?
Yeah, I mean, one of the theories on why Trump made that decision to go with Paxton, your surprise decision, was that maybe Trump had seen some polling that kind of showed him which way the wind was blowing in this primary. And, I think deep in it, sort of in his guts, I think Paxton has always kind of been more his guy anyway, simply because Paxton's always been much more loyal to Trump. There's been some public polling even now in the last couple of days that suggested that Paxton might be starting to open up a lead on Cornyn. So I wonder if that spurred Trump's thinking a little bit more that, like, hey, I kind of like this guy anyway. Now it's starting to look like he's going to win. I might as well get ahead of this and get with him now and get the win.
Given this kind of idea of gerrymandering, redistricting that we have been talking about, not just in this conversation, but you and I have talked about persistently over the last few months, and obviously the decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court, has the picture changed for Democrats to take back control of the House and the Senate come November?
On the House side, it's changed a little bit. I think the Democrats are still certainly favored to do that. But look, the Virginia map was supposed to be a net addition of 4 seats for the Democrats. That's wiped off the table by the state Supreme Court ruling. So ultimately, the events of the last month on the redistricting front, I think, are definitely poised to put the Republicans in a position where they're going to net more out of it than the Democrats. Now, that said, at the start of this cycle, the Republican cushion was basically 2 seats. They could afford a loss of 2 House seats. Otherwise, they lose control. I think with the redistricting, if that number is more like 8 or 10, that might be where it lands heading into 2026. That's still not much of a cushion. When the president's job approval rating is sitting at essentially 40% right now. Smaller battlefield, I think it gives them maybe a fighting chance, but they'd still be underdogs for sure.
What did I tell you? Tired but excited. I told you, tired but excited. Steve Kornacki, thank you.
We hit the right subjects.
So the race for governor in the state of Alabama is going to be this epic rematch, right? On the one hand, you have former Democratic senator for the state of Alabama, Doug Jones. On the other hand, you have current Republican senator for Alabama, Tommy Tuberville. These two actually went head to head back in 2020. I believe Senator Tuberville beat Doug Jones at the time by 20 percentage points. This time around, it's probably not going to be any easier for Doug Jones. But of course, he's hoping for a comeback and a chance to prove that Democrats can actually still resonate. They can actually still pull in votes in a heavily red, heavily Republican state like Alabama. But I want to find out how he actually plans to do that. So for this, Democratic nominee for Alabama governor and former Senator Doug Jones is here with me now. Welcome, Doug Jones.
Hey, how are you this morning? Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about today and beyond all the way to November. You're running for governor in the state of Alabama, a heavily red, heavily Republican state. This state has not seen a Democratic governor in office in over 2 decades. The last time that you won a statewide race was back in 2017. You were running against a flawed candidate, Roy Moore. That was also the first year in which President Trump was in the White House. Times haven't changed. How do you adjust your strategy? How are you planning on adjusting your strategy today through November and differentiate it from the way in which you ran back in 2017?
You know, I think our strategy is essentially the same. The difference, though, is that I think people are more receptive even now. And remember, when we won in 2017, I was also the first Democrat elected to the U.S. Senate in over 2 decades. So we've been here before. We have done this before. And we hit 2017 race talking about the very same issues that are important today. The kitchen table issues, affordability, electric bills, gas prices. Healthcare is a huge issue in Alabama. The affordability of healthcare, the access to healthcare is a huge issue. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to go straight at people and talk to them about who they are, their families, what's important to them. And the thing that I think, though, is the biggest difference here for us is that I think now people are looking, they are tired of the chaos. They are hurting for their affordability. They are looking for folks that can work together and not divide us. And that's a big issue. I know it may sound a little trite, but I'm telling you, it's a big issue out there right now.
So you bring up Tommy Tuberville, Senator Tuberville, who you're running against. You've run against him before. You lost to him back in 2020. I mentioned Roy Moore back in 2017. He was a flawed candidate. He faced sexual misconduct allegations with underage girls. He denied the allegations at the time. Senator Tommy Tuberville is facing something else now as well. He's a former college football coach, sitting U.S. Senator. In his primary race, one of the Republican primary challengers challenged Tuberville's residency. McPheeters said that he believes Tuberville lives in a multi-million-dollar home in Florida instead of a smaller home that he has listed as his residence in Auburn, Alabama. What has your campaign found out about Senator Tuberville's residency, and how are you planning on challenging that if, in fact, there is validity to this?
Oh, everybody knows he lives in Florida. He's always lived in Florida. That's just common knowledge. Everybody knows that he lives in Florida. But I want to mention there's more to it. The residency issue is a big deal. It's required that you live in Alabama for 7 years leading up to the election. And there's a lot of case law about things like that. So it is, that's typical of this, what we're seeing so much from a party that is dominating politics right now, is that they just don't care about the rule of law. They don't think that the rules apply to them. And yeah, in 2017, we had a flawed candidate, but I'm going to tell you something. Tommy Tuberville is just as flawed, just in a different way. He doesn't have those same allegations that Moore did. But let me tell you, when you've been a sitting United States senator and you virtually let no legislation passed, when you've been a senator and you have blocked the bipartisan nominations of generals, promotions of generals, in which even members of your own party take to the Senate floor to roundly criticize you, when you pit one race against the other the way he's done with teachers, with those on SNAP benefits, those kind of things, And quite frankly, when you're one of the most prolific stock traders in all of Congress and making a lot of money off the information you get as a United States Senator sitting on the Agriculture Committee, you've got a record that I don't think people care about, because affordability is going to be an issue, but so is the moral corruption that we see going on in Washington and in Alabama, down in Montgomery.
He's also backed by the President of the United States. And listen, in spite of President Trump's low approval ratings right now, he has been faring quite well in this primary season so far, especially when it comes to incumbent candidates, even primarying other Republicans, right? That we saw last night, for instance, with Massey. So how do you go up against the MAGA machine when you are facing, when you are in a state, I should say, that the president took by 30 points back in 2024, facing then candidate Kamala Harris?
The primaries are a sliver of voters, and it is more his voters. It is a sliver of voters. Look what's happened in the general elections over the last year and a half. Look at the margins of victory in Virginia and in New Jersey. Look at how Democrats overperformed in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district in Georgia. Look at the fact that in Florida, at his home residence, Donald Trump's now going to be represented by a Democrat in the state legislature. I don't think the primary election, certainly it shows a grip on the Republican Party, but that MAGA coalition is fracturing a good bit too. We're looking at a general election in which we expect more people to come out to vote. And if you look at the numbers last night, that's what we're seeing in Alabama.
I wonder if this is a question that you've ever had before, which is, are there any issues that you align with when it comes to the President Trump, especially in a Southern conservative state like Alabama?
Yeah, look, when I was in the Senate, I've voted with the administration on any number of issues, particularly with, at that time, defense spending. We increased defense spending. We beefed up our armed forces. Now, I got to tell you, I'm a little bit concerned about what the hell I see going on today with that. And I think I lined up a little bit more when I was in the Senate than what I see from this administration today. But certainly there are things. I'll give you one good example. 2 months ago, when the war started and all of a sudden gas prices started spiking in ways that people just could not handle it, the shock of incredibly high gas prices for our farmers and others, I called in Alabama for the state of Alabama and the governor and the legislature to suspend the gas tax. Alabama's gas tax is 10 cents per gallon. And I called, I think it's 10, maybe it's more than that, maybe like 30 cents. It's a lot, I'll put it that way. And I called for that suspension. Well, just the other day, the President of the United States calls for the same thing. I think that's a good thing right now. If he's not going to end this war and get prices down, at least do something to give folks a break. So yeah, we can always find that. And look, the president has sent some federal monies into Alabama. We've got a new submarine plant. I know that this is weird sounding, but we've got a submarine plant in North Alabama, 350 miles from the coast. They're building a submarine plant. But what I don't appreciate is the fact that he's treated farmers so bad and taken away their markets, and their fertilizer prices are through the roof. I don't appreciate the fact that he's gotten so much and has ignored the economy in our states the way he has, just to do a war in the Middle East that we're sending people over there to. That needs to end. So yes, we can find that common ground. That is what I did when I was in the United States Senate. It's what I'll do as governor of the state of Alabama.
Former Senator Doug Jones, thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
And by the way, we reached out to Senator Tommy Tuberville's campaign team for comment. They have not immediately responded to our request. We got to switch gears here and talk about what is happening in basketball right now, because you have the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're tipping off tonight, right, for Game 2 of the NBA Western Conference Finals. And if the first games of this series, last night and the night before, are any indication of what is to come, it is going to be such a nail-biter. For that, I have NBC News sports reporter Rohan Nadkarni to talk through it. Because, Rohan, last night's game, right, the Knicks, they were so far behind. And there's not many people that I would think who thought the Knicks could actually come back the way in which they did. How did they do it?
It was incredible. At one point in the fourth quarter, the Knicks had a 0.1% win probability, 22-point comeback. I mean, Jalen Brunson just continues to write his legend, in the hearts of Knicks fans. Just single-handedly carried them in that fourth quarter, 15 points, attacking James Harden over and over again. That's a series-defining win for the Knicks. I mean, they really snatched the soul out of the Cleveland Cavaliers with that comeback.
Then the Western Conference, the night before, they went into double overtime, right? Like both games were so intense to watch.
These are really the games that you dream about as a basketball fan. We've been waiting all year to see Victor Wembanyama go against the Oklahoma City Thunder in a playoff setting, and it delivered on every single level. The intensity, the desperation, the talent on both sides. This is a heavyweight fight already in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and we're just at the beginning. We got Spurs Thunder tonight, Knicks Cavs tomorrow night.
Oh, we're absolutely going to see the same energy. This is a legitimate rivalry. These teams don't like each other. The Thunder are a very proud franchise, but the Spurs have had their number this year. San Antonio is now 5-1 against OKC. Expect to see a huge punch back from the Thunder. Expect to see a really, really intense and focused effort. Like I said, this is a heavyweight fight. That was only round one. There are a lot more punches to be thrown, a lot more excitement to be had. I could absolutely see this series going the distance.
I hate that we have to depend on teams not liking each other to see good basketball, but nonetheless, we'll take it right now because we all need to watch some just good sports. Rohan Nadkarni, thank you. All right, that is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.